but that is that I make this disclaimer with WPMG in mind, saying that the opinions expressed by the presenter are not necessarily those of WPMG. They are the presenters. But I think you will find that David Domke has some really thoughtful things to say about what's going on in the country today. How many of you have heard David speak before? You're in very friendly ground. So you may know that David was a journalist who earned his PhD in communications and then came to the University of Washington as chair of the department, as professor and then chair of the Department of Communications at UW. And then more recently, he stepped down from that and from his long-held tenure as chair, and has gone into grassroots civil rights and political activism and helped found the organization Common Power. And I'd urge you to go to commonpower.org and see what they do. But this is a group of staff that, as they say, they are based locally but have a national impact. And their purpose is to get out the vote, and get out the vote for a fair and equal election. So it's also said in his bio that David always wears shorts, and I won the bet that he would be wearing shorts today. And the other is that he can eat more than 2 dozen chocolate chip cookies in one sitting. So it is my great pleasure to introduce David Domke to David.
Good afternoon, everybody. What a beautiful location to do a talk, right? I mean, this is lovely. So thank you all for being here. Thank you, Hugh, for asking me to come. And I will use the microphone because it's going to help, but there will be moments when I will probably set it down and just talk real loud. Okay, so we'll do the best. I'll do the best I can, and I'm going to move a little bit because I don't want to stand right here. I need to be touching my computer because I need to move through some slides. But I'm super glad to be here. I appreciate all of you. I don't have any political partisanship assumptions about the room, but I will say that if you're here, you probably are thoughtful about democracy, and you care about this country, and you're worried about the direction of where we're going as a people and as a society, and certainly the planet itself. And so I start with that as a set of kind of common grounds that I think we can work from. And what I want to do is present some data today that really give a picture of where the United States is as a democracy, where we are as a democracy, and where we can play a role in moving us towards a better place, I think. So I'm going to go over here, but we're going to reference the screen over here plenty of times. But you can see the title of the talk, Bending the Fight for Democracy, the right to vote. At Common Power, this organization that I'm part of, we really fight for the right to vote. We believe that the most common power that every citizen should have in a democracy is the right to vote. So that's where our name comes from, Common Power, the right to vote. Everybody should have that. And in America, that is not the case. There are so many different laws that affect who can vote, who can register to vote, and who can cast a vote in this country. And we're fighting around that assiduously in this country. Here's where I want to start. I want to start with a graph, and I understand that maybe in the back of the room it's tough to kind of read that, impossible to read that, and so you won't need to read anything on there. You just need to notice the trend lines on the graph. And I just recently had eye surgery a couple months ago, so I'm really thrilled that I can see it really well right now. So I'm here to please. I'm a good medical story, okay? I'm a really positive one. But I understand that, in the size of the room, you never know how big it is. Can people see everything? So the data that I present will always be intuitively understandable, even if you can't read the pieces on it. But this is from an organization, a newspaper called the Financial Times. And the Financial Times is a newspaper that's based in 2 places, in New York and in London. And they cover economics and markets and all kinds of stuff around the world. And they have something called a democracy index. And the democracy index, also sometimes known as authoritarianism index, because the continuum goes from highly democratic at one end to authoritarianism at the other end. Come on back, people. The index that they have captures how democratic or authoritarian a nation is. And it's an interesting thing to look at, and it's not a happy thing to look at often.
Help.
I think it's coming back. It's just this system seems to be slow the way it cycles through.
Is this on the local Wi-Fi for you?
I was not on Wi-Fi at all.
Oh, right.
There we go. Okay.
Right.
So I need to stay near my computer because it needs to stay on in a certain way, but I want to have you look at this. And there are 4 trend lines on this graph. And the trend across the bottom, what is the y-axis, which is the bottom axis, is number of years. And it starts at 0, and it moves all the way to, in this case, to 12 years. It goes from 0, like birth, to 12 years. And that timeline is the length of time from when a person takes power in a country. How many years from when that person takes power? So from 0 to 1 to 2 to 12 in this case. And those 4 trend lines all capture what's known as this democracy or authoritarian index. And the lower you go on this, as the trend lines go down, the more authoritarian a nation is. And they have 30 different indicators on this index. You can think of a health index or a happiness index or a misery index or an economic index. And it's made up of a bunch of different indicators. And there are 30 different ways they measure democracy and authoritarianism. So these are 4 countries. Each of the lines is a country that captures the decline in democracy within a country. As it goes lower on the trend line, it becomes more authoritarian. And what we're looking at here are 4 countries that we're really familiar with: Russia, Hungary, Turkey, and Venezuela. We're looking at 4 countries from when people took power who moved that country towards a more authoritarian direction. Chavez, Erdogan, Orban, Putin. So the lower they go, the more authoritarian the country's going, and it's over time, from 0 years from when the person took power till many years. And you can see that this is a bad trend line for anybody who lives and cares about democracy in those countries. But I want to now put the United States on here. This isn't my data. This is the Financial Times' data. This is them tracking, from an international news publication perspective, the level of authoritarianism in the United States. And again, the lower it goes, the lower on the slide it goes, the more authoritarian a country's becoming. And that's just fine print. We don't need to pay attention to that. It explains the 30-item index there. So we're going to start to see a little line here coming down, and that's Trump second term, right there. That's the Trump second term on the left side. It just that moved on down. We're going to see it come down again, sliding down the left side right there. And that's Trump 2.0 as of February 1st, 2026. So the pace towards authoritarianism is worse than it is in these other 4 countries that supposedly are far more authoritarianistic than the United States. This is the trend line as of February. I don't know what your experience of the United States has been since February, because now it's July 28th, but I don't think that line has gone back up since then. I don't think that we've rediscovered democracy in a new way. We don't have a Congress that can check the president on an Iran war, all right? We have a president yesterday who asked the U.S. Supreme Court to implement his executive order on voting in America. that would give essentially him control over voting. So the line, if they were to update this index, would be just keep going down. This is where we live. And for those of you in this room, for all of us in this room, that's really, really hard to deal with and to like accept that as a truth. But that is the America that we live in today. And for many of the people who work with us at Common Power, who are under the age of 40 years old, it is pretty much the only political America that they know about since Donald Trump went down the escalator in 2015 and ran for presidency. I work for an organization called Common Power that is committed to fighting this, okay? And this is our mission statement for Common Power. We seek to be an organizing force for recruiting, educating, and mobilizing next generation leaders and everyday volunteers to win elections. We seek to be an organizing force, a system. I'll show you the system in a second here. For what do? We recruit, we educate, and we mobilize. Who? Next generation leaders and everyday committed volunteers to do what? To win elections. Because in America, whatever you think, feel, hope, wish, want, desire, treasure, doesn't make any difference at all if in politics you don't have power. If you don't have control of the U.S. House or control of the U.S. Senate, you can't get a bill to come up that you want to have discussed. If you don't have local power, the issues that you are concerned about in West Seattle or in Seattle can't get brought up. So we used to be an organization called Common Purpose because we were committed to a common purpose, the fight for democracy, with a bunch of people in 2018 that started out volunteering and going around this country and working to win elections. And we had a common purpose, and that's a very powerful term, common purpose. We worked with local organizations in state after state around the country: Virginia, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Ohio, Florida, North Carolina, Arizona, Nevada, Texas, and so on and so on. And what people there, the local orgs that we worked with, told us over and over and over again is they said, we appreciate your purpose. We are so glad you have this purpose. At the end of the day, though, they said, what we are fighting for is not purpose. We are fighting for power. Purpose is great, but without power, it doesn't get anything done. And so for people who live in a largely blue enclave in this country, we at Common Power understood that to fight for purpose was not enough. It was about genuine power. And we needed to win elections to make that so. You've got to win elections. And so this is our system. It's our organizing system. And it's a summary of what we do, but you can see there's 3 pillars on there. There's education, there's leadership development, there's action, which to us is working in elections. And we have through lines for all the people who participate in our work. We have a Gen Z program called Action Academy. Right now we have 380 students meeting twice a week on Zoom from 37 states and 18 countries around the world that are part of a civic internship that we pay them $1,000 to spend 10 weeks with us. That's our Action Academy program. It goes through education, through leadership development, through action. Then down at the bottom, we have another massive program that we have called the Institute for Common Power. And that brings in volunteers who want to learn and study with us, want to take trips to the South and learn more and some deep dives. And we also support educators who really want our kind of para-educational teaching that schools don't offer anymore. So we have these really 2 awesome programs, Action Academy and the Institute, and then we have this middle space for people who don't really want that work, but they just want to come and win elections, just want to come knock doors in key states. Those 3 through lines go through education, leadership development, and action, and that's the work that we do. And what's our outcome with the power that we're seeking? We're seeking fair elections, fair voting, and new elected leadership in this country. We need that. That's the work we're doing. So that's the body of work that I come from, and some of you in this room are very familiar with that, with Common Power, and some of you are tremendous supporters of our work. And we are grateful because we are entirely supported by individual donations. No government monies, no long-term grants. It's all supported by people that are trying to make a difference in democracy. Here's the premise that guides us on a daily basis. We start with the incredible phrase of Dr. Martin Luther King. His vision of the moral arc of the universe is something that regularly inspires people. And his famous phrase was, "The arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice." And when you read his speeches and look at the things that he said in the 1950s and the 1960s, this was a common thing he would say. It's in most of the speeches that anybody would read. And when he would go and speak to different organizations, he would say this: "The arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends toward justice." And so when I hear that, and I read this, and I've spent so much time immersed in the teachings of Dr. King and the modern civil rights movement, because it was a profound revolution for this country. When I read that and think about it, I always think of an arc in this kind of way. It's an arch, essentially, and I think of an arc like a rainbow. I think of an arc of a lifetime, and it always, in my mind, is nice and smooth. It's a lovely arch. It's like those really great Roman arches, or that great arch that Donald Trump's trying to create. Well, I'm just joking, okay, in Washington, D.C. It's an arch, and it's smooth. Because that's the cultural kind of template that we have for thinking about an arch or an arc. And so when King gives us that language, the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice, we inevitably, for those of us that really want this to be true, we inevitably start to think like that is the way it's going to work. And that isn't remotely the way it works. It isn't. The experience of those people who are committed to a moral universe, to a place where people are treated like humans, ethically, morally, in all kinds of ways that recognize the humanity, the dignity of each of us, the arc looks more like this, okay? So here's the question that we have, though. Does it really occur, and if so, how does it occur? And so I want to say, well, I think it does occur, but here's how I think the arc bent really works. I think it goes like this. Okay, so let's go. Up on the left side is the start of trying to bend the arc. Imagine that's me and all of you in this room, and we're trying to make the world a better place. Take whatever thing you're committed to, whatever piece about democracy that you really care about, healthcare, medical care, whatever it is that you really care about. Imagine we're trying to bend the moral universe in a positive way. And so we start, and we get off, and we're off to a good start, hopefully. And then what happens is we run into something, and it knocks us sideways. All right, we get knocked off course, and then we pick ourselves up again if we have the resilience to do so, and many people don't. We pick ourselves up again and we start going, and we make some progress, and then we get knocked back again, and then we hope to keep making progress. Anybody who spends time looking at the history of America and the fight for justice and equality in this country knows very quickly that the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice only sometimes. It certainly doesn't bend towards justice for many people of color, women, queer people in this country. The fight is long and it's hard and it's brutal. That's more like the way the arc works, and it's exhausting. And it's many lifetimes. John Lewis, the great congressman, great civil rights leader, would say that the fight for a multiracial democracy is not the fight of a season, it's not the fight of a campaign, it's not the fight of an election, it's the fight of a lifetime. So I think the truth, the bending of the moral arc of the universe is more something like this. Somebody's constantly contesting you every step of the way, and it's many somebodies. The fight is brutal, the fight is tough. And I think that the reality is that the arc of the moral universe is long, it's jagged, it's brutally contested, it's unguaranteed. But we work to bend it because of our commitment to a more just world and to one another, past, present, and future. If this is the truth, and I don't know, there's a lot of things I don't know, but I know enough that this is true in my mind, that this is the way it works. Jagged, long, brutally contested, and unguaranteed, then it's very, very hard. And it's very, very hard for everybody. And if it's really, really hard for a white heterosexual guy like me, then it's brutal. It's devastating for people that don't have those privileges. So if you're gonna be part of this, it's gonna be long, hard, and difficult, and you sure as heck are gonna live through some really tough times, and we got the opportunity to live through some of those right now. Nobody would have chose it, but we're here. And the question isn't why are they here? We can study that and examine that. The question really to us in the room is, what are you gonna do about it? What are we gonna do? Are we just gonna be troubled and concerned and bothered, or are we gonna give up a tenured position at the University of Washington to go start another organization, which I decided to do a decade ago? What are we gonna do? People make choices. I want to talk a little bit about some evidence from the states, just to give you a sense of what it looks like in America and why every single election, every key state in this country matters. That every single state really, really matters. There are no states that don't matter. And I want to highlight 3 books that have really informed this body of work, because you might be a book reading audience. And if you're interested, recommend these. Give Us the Ballot by a journalist by the name of Ari Berman, which is about the fight to vote in America. One Person, No Vote, which is by Dr. Carol Anderson, who's a professor at Emory University in Atlanta, and has written about the kind of post-Obama attack on voting in America. And then Jacob Grumbach, who was a professor at UC Berkeley, was a professor at the University of Washington until a couple of years ago, went to Berkeley, runs a center there on democracy, and he has written a book called Laboratories Against Democracy. And the laboratories in his book are states. How states serve as places where ideas get tested out, tried, become laboratories that then get implemented on the national level. And so he studies states, what's going on in state politics. So I'm going to stick with Grumbach for the rest of my presentation and look at something that he's created called the State Democracy Index. Grumbach has looked at all 50 states in this country, and he's created an index, just like there was an authoritarian index to start this talk. He's created an index of state democracy, and he's particularly interested on issues of free speech, free voting, right to a jury trial, right to against search and seizure, all of the kind of civil liberties that are embodied in the first 10 amendments of the Constitution. And he's created an index. And the things that he looks at to create this index, he's got more than 50 indicators on this. You can't read this, of course. I just put it up there to show you what a computer file looks like of when you're building a state democracy index. He's got a whole bunch of things that he has factored into his index. And the higher you are in the index, the more democratic, small d, democratic a state is, and the lower you are in that index, the less democratic. So he's got more than 50 items that make up this index. I'm going to shrink them down for our purposes to six categories. 6 categories around democracy. One is about voter registration. How easy is it to register to vote in a state? We happen to live in a state where it is very, very easy to register to vote. My son is 18 years old, turned 18. You know what it took for him to register to vote? He had to fill out a form online and hit submit. And then he got in the mail his voter registration. He's got it. He's going to vote for the very first time in 2 weeks in Seattle. Many other states do not make it near that easy. I could spend all day long talking to you about how difficult it is to register voters in Texas, in Tennessee, in some states in this country. So the easier it is to register voters, the more democratic a state is, because we want people to vote. We're common power. We want people to be able to vote. All right? A second measure that they have is voting methods. How many different ways can you vote in a state? Can you vote by mail? Can you vote in person? Can you vote in person early? Can you vote the day of? Can you vote how many weeks early can you vote? Can your ballots show up the day after the election? So the more opportunities to make for people to vote, the more different ways they can get there, then they're more democratic. I'm for making voting as easy it is as to fill up a gas tank of a car. If we really cared about voting and democracy, then we would make it as easy to vote as it is to fill up your car with gas. You'd pull up and you'd have to fill it up. Now, there should be some restrictions on that, like a driver's license perhaps. But the reality is that we would make it so easy. We don't. So how many voting methods does a state offer? The more that you offer, the more democratic you are. Election security, what kind of protections do you have? Some states, it's up to the will of the legislature to overturn elections. Other states, no, you can't do it that way. There's a commission and there's paper ballots and other pieces. So the more security measures we have around voting, the better. That protects your vote. When we vote, we know it'll count. So the first three things, we want them better. We want more voter registration ease, we want more ways to vote, and we want better election security. That makes a state more democratic. The next three items go a little bit differently. Felony disfranchisement is a law that exists in 48 out of 50 states in this country, that if you're convicted of a felony, you lose the right to vote in a state. This goes all the way back to the Civil War. It was explicitly an attempt to relinquish the right to vote from Black Americans by creating a legal system that incarcerated Black Americans and making them not eligible to vote. 48 out of 50 states have this as a law in this country today. Washington State does. You lose the right to vote if you're convicted of a felony. So some states are better than other states, though. Sometimes you get that right to vote back pretty quickly. Sometimes you have to go through constant hoops and forms and processes. So the easier it is to get your right to vote back after being felony disfranchised is a good democracy thing. Now, I don't know how you feel about felony disfranchisement. It's probably not something that the average human ever thinks about. But in America today, in 48 out of 50 states, if you're convicted of a felony, you lose the right to vote for at least some time, some states permanently. I'm an absolutist on the right to vote. I believe that no matter what crime you do, you should never lose the right to vote. Because even when you're in prison, you are likely still doing some kind of work, some kind of labor that contributes to the society. That's my position. But I can reasonably have discussions with people who say, you should lose the right to vote if you're in prison for X crimes, or if you should lose it for a period of time. So we can discuss that. But in general, states that make it easier to get the right to vote back after you've been felony disfranchised, that's good for democracy. Because study after study has shown us that one of the most important things that predicts whether somebody re-offends and goes back to jail is whether or not they get the right to vote. If they get the right to vote back after they come out of jail, they feel like they're citizens. They become part of society. So I'm all for that. Let's give them at least the right to vote back when they're done with their time. And then the last two, voter ID laws and gerrymandering, are a little bit more self-obvious. What are the IDs, the voter identification laws that a state has? I'm not against voter ID. I'm against unfair voter ID. I'm good with everybody having a voter ID and having to show that to a vote, as long as we make it as accessible as possible. In the state of Texas, for example, you can vote with a voter ID that's a hunting license, but not a student ID. Not a college student ID. Why is that? Because the Republican legislature in that state wanted to make it easier for hunters to vote and didn't want younger people to vote. This is a pattern that goes across this country. I want fair voter ID laws across all the states. If we do that, I'm all for voter ID. But let's make sure that there's a wide range of IDs that count and that it's fair to Americans and it isn't discriminatory. And then gerrymandering is the drawing of congressional and state house districts in ways that benefit one party or another. The Supreme Court has ruled that it's legal to draw districts however you want for political purposes. So you can either draw districts very fairly, or you can do it in distinctly political partisan ways. The more politically partisan you draw districts, the less democratic you are, small d democratic. Okay? These are 6 different categories by which a state might show up on a democracy index. This is the graph that I came to present to you. Okay? You can't see it because right now it's whited out in the middle, so I want to tell you what we're going to look at here. But across the bottom, again, is a timeline. This time it's literal years of of like counting years, 2000 all the way to 2018. And this is Jacob Grumbach's graph. From 2000 to 2018, this is what his book is about. So it's tracking 19 years of states. Every state, 19 years. And what it's doing is it's tracking how democratic, small d democratic, the states are. Every year, a state gets mapped onto here, and it tracks over time. He's done it for all 50. It's an incredible scholarly endeavor. It's absolutely brilliant. And it gives us insight into states. I'm not going to show you each state, like Washington and New York. I'm going to cluster them into 3 categories of states. I'm going to take all 50 and cluster them, because Grumbach has done this, into states that fall into one of 3 categories. The first category is a state that has a trifecta of political leadership that is Republican. A governor in each house of the state senate and the state legislature. That's a trifecta, Republican trifecta. That's the red line. Republicans control power in those states. The blue line is a Democratic trifecta. The Democrats hold the governor's seat and both chambers of the state legislature. That's Washington State and other states that are really blue states. That's a blue trifecta. The third line, which to me is the most interesting line here, is the gray line, and that's where there's divided government. Where there's some Republicans in leadership and there's some Democrats in leadership. Okay? So Grumbach every single year charts out where the states have been across 19 years on this democracy index, and then tracks them over time. And I've started to show you the beginning of this trend line over time, and all I want to show you there at the beginning is to show you that the 3 lines are all clustered together at the beginning. This is the beginning. And there's 3 lines in there. There's a red line, and there's a gray line, and there's a blue line. They look identical where they are. The more democratic a state is, you go higher on this index. The less democratic a state is, you go lower on this index. So for someone who cares about democracy, myself, a state going up higher, that's where I want my state to be. A state going lower, that's not a state that I'm thrilled about, all right? So all we're doing is looking at 3 lines. Republican-controlled states, Democratic-controlled states, and divided government states. And we're looking across 19 years. This is the kind of stuff that when a fellow researcher, a professor of yours, that somebody you know does something like this, I sit in the audience and I just look at them and I say, respect. That is a hell of a lot of work. That is the kind of work that tells us something. All right? So here's the patterns over time. Okay? Across 19 years, from basically identical party to party, no real difference in 2000, to an absolute divergence over time. Down here are where Republicans are in 2018. Grumbach's data stops in 2018. He's actually extended it now to 2024. I don't have that data with me, but he's extended it, and you can take your own guess about the line does not come up. Okay, these are Republican-controlled states, trifectas. Whereas the blue line, the Democrats went up, and they've slightly diminished back down in terms of democracy, but they went the opposite way. And then right in the middle is divided government. Okay, so Democrats went that way, Republicans went that way. Right in the middle is divided government. What that middle line shows us is not the power of divided government. That middle line tells us, this is the only way that Grumbach and I can see this, is that when the Democrats in a state have at least some power, we have a democracy. When they don't, democracy has gone off a cliff in this country. This Republican Party is not the Republican Party of 1992 when Dan Evans was governor. It's not the Republican Party of when George H.W. Bush was president. It is the MAGA, Donald Trump, and that is a truth that is leading to an authoritarian cliff in this country. So we look at this at Common Power and we say Democrats suck. That's our view. They suck as a political party. But at least they're not taking us down into the abyss. And right now, one party is taking us into the abyss. And the whole thing about Common Power, and the reason I left my position, is because you can't say what I just said at the University of Washington these days. You can't say it. Not because it's not true, because this is just true data. These are data. You can't say it because it's not true. You can't say it because you'll pay a political price for it. So I looked at this kind of information and I said, what am I going to do about it? What are we going to do about it? And that's where we built Common Power. Okay? These are the 6 indicators, again, of that ground box data look at. How easy is it to register to vote? How many voting methods are there? Is there good election security? How easy is it for someone to gain the right to vote back after being disfranchised? How fair are the voter ID laws? And then how bad is the gerrymandering in that state? Among these 6 items, these are the items that the Democrats have really emphasized in the last 20 years. Voter registration, making it as easy as possible. Voting methods, making them as diverse as possible. And trying to reduce felony disfranchisement in states. Washington State, 2017, changed our felony disfranchisement law. We still have one. It used to be that you didn't get the right to vote back until you had completed your time in jail, your probation, and your parole. All 3 of them. Now, after the 2017 law change, you get the right to vote back when you come out of jail. Before probation, before parole, because they believe, I think correctly, that it's going to help you to serve your probation and your parole better by being a functioning citizen. Michigan today has the very first automatic voter re-registration process for people that have been felony disfranchised. What's up, sir?
Would you put down the microphone and just yell at us?
Oh.
Instead?
This gentleman wants me to yell at you without the microphone.
We're just gonna you already are. Turn it off.
Okay, I'll turn the volume down right here.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Democrats have made it easier to vote in this country. In Michigan, they have the first automatic voter re-registration law that when you come out of jail, you are automatically, in the computer system of the state, re-registered to vote. Well, shouldn't it be that way for everybody? I think so. You don't have to agree with me, but we should absolutely make it easier to vote. So these have been the things that Democrats have pushed. In contrast, that's where the Democrats focus. In contrast, Republicans have pushed these 2 things. Voter ID laws, this is what Donald Trump is literally doing. He's trying to create a voter ID system in the United States where if you're not on a voter registration registry, right now, you will not be able to vote in this election. That is exactly what he's trying to do right now. Voter ID laws that make it difficult for many people to vote. The SAVE Act, I don't know if you know about the SAVE Act, but it is his major thing that he wants passed. Thank you. Thank you.
You're yelling
I'm sorry, sir. Yeah, sorry. The SAVE Act in the U.S. Congress that Trump is saying he won't pass any bills or do anything with, literally would make it essential for you to show either a passport or a birth certificate in order to register to vote. 50% of Americans say don't have a passport. It costs money to have a passport. 50% don't. So if you don't have a passport, then you need to show up with a birth certificate. Many women in this country do not have the last name that they had in the birth certificate. Some men. It's a law intended to make it easier for certain people to vote and not others. So Republicans have focused on this, and they certainly have made brutally powerful the gerrymandering laws, and we've been fighting against that all over the country. The day after the Supreme Court's decision in April, eliminating sections of the Voting Rights Act, Alabama, Texas, Florida, Louisiana, Missouri, Tennessee, all re-gerrymandered their districts to make it harder for Black Americans and young Americans to vote in the South. Okay, so I'm going to finish here. The arc of the moral universe is long. It may bend towards justice. It bends towards justice if we bend it towards justice. This is the organization that I work at, Common Power. We're committed to bending it towards justice. In fact, we just put out a book. Published it 2 weeks ago. Brought some copies today. Called Reclaiming Democracy. A history of voter suppression, history of voter disfranchisement and the future of voter empowerment. And it's got this incredible images from the fight to vote in America, okay? That's a literacy test that you're looking at right there. Here's people fighting to vote in America today, in both historically and today. The book is $75. It's a coffee table book. But we published it ourselves because that means at Common Power that 2/3 of every purchase of that book goes towards our programming. 2/3 of it, okay? So we're committed to this work. And I'm going to end here. If you want to make a difference in this election, in figuring out who's going to be leading this country and who's going to have power after the elections, and I don't have any expectations. I'm going to preempt the first question that's coming. We're not going to have free and fair elections this fall. We're not. They're not. It's going to be brutally contested, jagged, unguaranteed every step of the way. Every step of the way, we're going to have to fight. But these are the states that we're focused on in our work. These are the states where control of Congress is going to be decided. Maine, Ohio, Michigan. Every state that has a star has an important Senate race in it, U.S. Senate race. Every state that we're in also has important House races, important governor's races. We are working in all of these states, and what it means for Common Power to work in these states is that we partner with local organizations that want more human power to come knock doors and mobilize voters, and that's what we do. We deliver humans. We deliver people to do that work. Our young voters, our folks who've gone through our Action Academy program, the ones who have gone through 10 weeks of a summer internship, come out and sponsor them to go out into the field and do work. We have 300 plus educators, K through college educators, who teach and do work with us, looking for inspiration, looking for hope. They go out and knock doors. We sponsor them to go as well. So what we do is we send volunteers to mobilize voters in all these states. Any one of these states, it could come down to it, to the decision of who controls the Congress. Mary Peltola versus Dan Sullivan in Alaska. It could come down to James Tallarico versus Ken Paxton in Texas. It could come down to Troy Jackson versus Susan Collins in Maine. So this is the body of work we're committed to. And the unfortunate, terrible reality today is that the fight for democracy is not a partisan endeavor at this moment. It's not. It's cross-partisan. Many voters who will vote for the Democrats this fall selected Trump in 2024. They did. It's an existential reality for all of us right now. And so that's what I came to talk about. And I probably said it in some cases a little bit stronger than some of you might feel or wish or want. Louder certainly than this gentleman would like sometimes. All right? But I am certainly committed to this work and honored to be here. Thanks.
So we have time to question Dr. Domke. Any reactions, questions? Bill?
Yeah, so I think all of us are getting emails every day from all these states, from so many people we don't know.
I'll repeat the question in a
It's so
second.
overwhelming.
Yeah.
So I was just looking for where do we put our money? What would make sense to do in terms of sort of distributing what we have to sort of causes like this?
Okay, so the question is, you and probably many others in the room get regular texts and emails asking you to donate to different causes, to organizations and to candidates. I certainly get about 300 to 400 of them a day. Okay? No exaggeration. I'm on so many different lists. Okay? What do you do with all of them? Well, at Common Power, we say, look at this map, and if you care about a particular candidate, let's just take Iowa. Let's just take Iowa. It's a state that Barack Obama won twice, 2008 and 12. Donald Trump has won it 3 straight elections. The Republicans control all power in the state. Republican governor, Republican supermajority in the state legislature. And this particular election, the Democrats have a really great Democratic candidate, Rob Sand, who's running for governor in that state. And Sylvia, I know you care about Iowa, but I didn't think about this because of you. I just happened to go to Iowa in my mind. They also have a really great Senate candidate, Josh Turek, who is a 4-time Paralympian, 2-time gold medalist. He campaigns door to door in he currently occupies the state legislative seat he's a Democrat, that is the most conservative seat held by a Democrat in the state. Josh Turek, in the reddest district in the seat in the state of any Democrat that is in state office. Turek is the Senate candidate. So they got Rob Sand running for governor, and they got Josh Turek as Paralympian. And then there are 4 congressional districts, 4 House districts in the state, and there are at least 3 very competitive House districts in the state that are winnable. In fact, Marion Miller Meeks is the holder right now. She won that seat by 8 votes in 2020. Very competitive. So this is just one example, but let's say you have a heart for Iowa, and you're like, I care about Iowa. And what we say to you, we at Common Power say is, if you give money to us, you have myself and my colleague right here, Abby Merritt's commitment that money is going to go to Iowa. Okay, that's the way our campaign is set up. You get to click a box and say, I want Iowa. Okay, you get to click that box. And if you want to go to Texas because you really want to beat Ken Paxton, I don't know if anybody in this room wants to beat Ken Paxton, but I sure as hell do. All right? And it's James Talarico, a great candidate. It's just about the best thing you could create in a laboratory in Texas. Okay? Then click the Texas box. And here's why we ask you to do that. It's because when you give money directly to Talarico, he doesn't need your money. Talarico raised $50 million. It's not an exaggeration. $50 million in the second quarter, 3 months. Okay, he's got so much money. And if you give it to him, he's going to use it for advertising and different things. And that's just fine, because he needs that. But if you give the money to Common Power and you want it to go to Texas, then you're going to sponsor a young person to go have that experience. You're going to sponsor them to go do work out there in the field. And these are 18 to 25 years old people, and they get their lives transformed by that experience. And we don't just do it for the young people. We have an intergenerational process. So we sponsor the young people, but they go out into the field with people like this in the room who pay their own way to go. So if you give money to Common Power, then you get the candidate that you want out there, if it's one of our states, and you get the double win of supporting a young person to go do that work. So this is why we are the out-of-state volunteer coordinator for the Wisconsin Democrats. They send all their out-of-state volunteers to Common Power. This is why we're the out-of-state coordinator for the Maine Democrats this election. They say, you're going to bring people? Great. We'll send anybody who's interested in out-of-state working through Common Power. So we would ask for that money with our commitment to go to these states. Now, if you want to directly contribute to any of these states, I would just say any of these are great. Any of them with the stars. You want to support Dan Osborne? He's an independent in Nebraska. He's got a real chance to win. All right? Real chance to win. Then great. We got a team Nebraska. So either support us or support Osborne directly. Yep. So we're a one-stop donations shop. Isn't that great? That's, right? And the reason I feel comfortable making that pitch and that statement is because it's not for me. It's for these young people to have that experience. Yep.
Thank you. Other questions, comments? How do you, yeah.
So in 2020, I was on an airplane to visit my daughter in Idaho, and the guy who sat next to me started carrying on about this election denial crap from Trump. And I said, you know, there has been problems with election security in the past. Tammany Hall in New York was famous for ballot stuffing, and that happens. But I'm trained in evidence, and there's absolutely no evidence. All of the courts have told you that there's no support for the claim that there was any fraud in that election. And, you know, we had a discussion back and forth, and he said, I never knew any of this. It seems reasonable to be concerned about security, as he said. And it has been an issue in the past, but it's much harder with a decent system to make that happen. And he changed his mind. I didn't think that was possible, but it was quite the experience. I think that's just like other negative issues, sexism or racism. It's important to call it out when we run into it.
David?
Well, there's two pieces I hear here. One is the false claim about election fraud. The election fraud that we need to be concerned about is people stealing the votes, generally, as opposed to people faking who they are to vote.
Right.
All right? Stealing the votes such as, for example, a legislature just overriding a vote because they said this didn't really happen in Maricopa County in Arizona. Now, that's the concern that we have, is that there will be people in office elected there, put there by MAGA leadership that will steal the votes. That's the election security that I think we need to be worried about. Not that I might go fake myself and argue who I am, or that illegal or undocumented people might go vote. There's so little of that, and study after study, including by conservative institutions, have shown that, as you're saying. So the first point is, election fraud is a big lie argument that Donald Trump has leveraged because he just doesn't care. He doesn't care about democracy. If you cared about democracy, you would not undermine the core thing of the entire endeavor, voting. You would do everything to make it better. The second issue, though, is the talking to somebody who brings up an issue or position that you know is just false or is really poorly grounded or understood, whether it's election fraud or arguments about what immigrants do in this country. I think that every one of us in those moments faces the choice of whether we're going to have a conversation with the person. We all know that moment in time when you sit on a plane and the person turns on the Fox News right next to you, or opens up the book and it's Dinesh D'Souza or somebody else's book. We all know that moment. And just as they look at the book, that, like if I open the Jacob Kronbach book, they wouldn't know that one. But they have a certain feeling towards me. We all know what that feeling is like, and the question in our mind is, are we going to engage or not? Are we going to engage or not? Walking through the state capitol grounds of Virginia a couple of years ago, I was with a group and we were learning about the fight for voting, and we walked right past a J6 group that was arguing that these folks had been wrongly incarcerated, that they were really the patriots, January 6 folks. And he looked at me and I looked at him and I said, oh, you're J6ers. And he said, I know who you are. See, there was no sign up or anything, but the fact that I called him a J6er, he said, I know who you are. And I said, and I know you who you are. There was no engagement going to happen there in that moment. Like, that wasn't going to be a moment, let's sit down and talk. He wasn't looking to it to me, I wasn't looking at it for him. So every time we are in that moment, we have to decide whether we're going to talk to somebody. And I just do a little mental calculus in my head. What is the possible return on this investment? What is the possible return on this investment? And I give it like a little test. A little test. Like just little things about, like, hey, what do you think about that war in Iran? Or what do you think about the issue of something? And just see where we're at. And if there's an openness, then I'm all in for that conversation. Whether it's a family member or a friend or a colleague or somebody I just met on a plane, if there's a decided closeness, I am not gonna spend my energy on that. Not because I don't think they're worth it, but because I only have so much energy. And I'd rather raise money and do all these other things than try to talk a guy from Idaho out of that. But somebody's gotta do that. And if I feel there's a possibility for it, then I do think there's an ethical value of that for me. And by the way, the Idaho 1st Congressional District is competitive this year. All right? So everybody in this country matters. We just have to make that choice in that moment. And that's a decision that each of us makes. I make it every single day, multiple times a day with people.
I think we are in a severely divided country, and I would agree with you. What are the opportunities to build bridges in communication? My latest interests are about disinformation and disinformation around science. How, in the coming elections, how much disinformation, misinformation is going to be out there? And then how do we know how to understand and identify that disinformation? And that's one of the concerns I have about the election itself. AI itself will help promote all kinds of disinformation, fake photos, fake statements from candidates. And we don't have any way to regulate that or stop it. How do we recognize that? On both sides. I mean, it also is a bipartisan misinformation effort going on. But do you have a comment about that?
Well, I love you, Hugh.
Well, I love you too.
Okay, thank you. I do not think it is a bipartisan, symmetrical disinformation and misinformation universe that we live in. I do not think that is the case. I think that certain people believe in facts and other people construct their realities. All right? So the reality is that I want to work with everybody that's committed to a democracy that believes where everybody should have a chance to vote. And in those spaces, in that time, that to me is not a partisan endeavor. It's like, who are you? What are you? Where's your background? Where are you coming from? What do you care about? Do you care about your children going to school? About being able to pay for the gas in your car? These kinds of things. And I think the misinformation, disinformation ecosystem that has been led by Fox and other entities and now is rampant on the internet has absolutely contributed tremendously to our partisan divide in this country. Absolutely. I do think that people on both sides find comfort in their own truths. I do think that's the case. But I think it's really asymmetrical in that it's really like the United States and Iran in terms of the level of creation of the material. The misinformation and disinformation on one side is profound, and the misinformation and disinformation on the other side is pathetic. And so it's steamrolled. Yeah.
Any other last minute comments or reactions or questions?
We have these copies of these books. If you're interested, we'd love to have your support. Let's make sure we do something for democracy. We'd really be honored to have you. Yeah.
So I want to thank you, David. And so please watch your emails because there will be invitations for a house party at the Madweds in September. And the first 20 or so who RSVP will win their presents at the house. Also, call us if you would like to volunteer for a house party in your local neighborhood, or if you know of others who would like to do that. Our effort is to build community and to have conversations. And as I say, conversations are as important now as they ever were for our aging brains. And to be able to listen and respond is also good for our health. So please join us at local parties and join us again in October 22nd, when we'll be at the Seattle Arboretum, and you'll be getting messages about that. And tell others that our numbers are growing, and I hope our attendance will continue to grow. So we share in our community. So thank you for coming. Thank you.